this is the second of two videos about chord resolution. If you haven't seen the first one, it's here. Okay, you may also find, if you haven't seen them, my videos on really basic harmony useful as well. This video, like all the others in the series, is designed to tie in with my book, How to Really Play the Piano, which you can see here. But you don't need to be reading the book to find the videos useful. Okay, so in the last video we talked about the three most important chords in any key, which are the tonic, the subdominant and the dominant. Okay, in this video we're just going to think about how you can use combinations of the subdominant and the dominant to resolve onto the tonic. Let's think about what that word resolve means. Basically, it's talking about the resolution of tension between two chords. And typically when we talk about a chord that resolves onto the tonic of the key, we're referring to a chord that sets up a kind of tension that, if you like, wants to resolve onto that particular chord. So for example, if we're in the key of C and we were to play a chord of G, you can hear that it kind of wants to resolve back onto C. There's a tension and release. We can make that tension stronger by making the dominant into a dominant seventh. That is by adding an F. Or we can make it a little bit weaker by using the subdominant rather than the dominant. Okay, so that's using chords 4 or 5, subdominant or dominant, to resolve back onto the tonic. Now, the particular chord you decide on to create any resolution kind of depends on the song you're playing, or how you're improvising or whatever. And very often you won't have a choice. The chord sequence will say do this, play this particular sequence of chords. Often what you find you can do when you're improvising, though, is take a resolution that sounds a little bit too neat and tidy or a little bit boring and make it more interesting. For example, the dominant to tonic resolution, what we might call a 5-1 resolution, sometimes is a little bit dull. It sounds a bit pat. It's a bit too neat and tidy. Okay, a little bit cheesy if you like. There are several ways that we can use alternative dominant and quasi-dominant chords to replace that dominant. A really good one, obviously, is the subdominant, but if you feel that's not quite strong enough, what you can do is play the subdominant with a single dominant note in the key of C, that's G, in the bass. Like that. Okay? The other chord that works quite well is the minor seventh, based on the second note of the scale, D minor 7 in the key of C, with a G in the bass. And as you can hear, that resolves quite strongly. D minor 7, of course, is quite similar to F. Or make it a bit richer still, F major 7, G in the bass, to C. What that does is create different strengths of resolution. Some resolutions, you can use the word interchangeably, are stronger than others. If we're in the key of E, for example, there are a number of chords that we can use in different ways to create stronger and weaker resolutions. Okay, so the obvious one is the dominant chord, B, but we can also use B7, which is stronger. We can use A, which is the subdominant, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth chord, a little bit weaker, or quite a lot weaker in fact. A over B, which is the same as doing F over G in the chord of C, in the key of C. And then the various other variations we looked at: A major 7 over B, F sharp minor 7 over B to E. Okay, if you're reading from the book, you can see all those chords written out on page 25 in different examples and configurations. The dominant effect in minor keys works in pretty much the same way. Let's imagine we're in the key of A minor. Okay, the main dominant, the dominant chord in that key, based on the fifth note of the scale, is E major. Remember that minor keys also have dominant majors, so E is the dominant of A minor, but also of A major. Okay, anyway, so E resolves quite strongly onto A minor. E7, even stronger. Then we've got a couple of other choices. D minor 7, a little bit weaker, but still resolves. And then weaker still is F to A minor. Okay, the straightforward subdominant chord in A minor, D minor, does resolve moderately well, but not as well as D minor 7. Okay, it's interesting that F resolves onto A minor. F, of course, is the subdominant of the key of C, which, if you know a little bit of music theory, you'll know is the relative minor of A minor. So C major and A minor are relative minors and majors to each other. All that means is that they have the same number of sharps and flats in the key signature, and that they share some characteristics. The trick to understanding dominant chords and subdominant chords and quasi-dominant chords is just to, rather than try and sort of get your head around it on a theoretical level, is to play around, experiment, and as with all things, just let a sense of how they work get under your skin. A really good way of doing that is to take a number of different keys, you know, maybe C, maybe E flat, maybe G minor, and work out what the first, fourth and fifth chords for each one is, and then figure out how they resolve to each other. A final important thing to bear in mind is to remember that if you say you're in the key of C, the dominant chord G doesn't have to resolve back onto C. Okay, it can go elsewhere. It wants to resolve onto C. You can feel the tension and release, but it doesn't have to. Say, for example, you could have a chord sequence that went something like C, F, G, really wants to go on to C, but you could also go somewhere like A minor, or you could go C, F, G7, really wants to go down onto C, but could go to D minor 7. Okay, so dominant chords want to resolve back to the tonic, but they don't have to. Okay, if you have any questions or comments, by all means post them in the comment thread on the original Jamcast post where you'll find this video embedded. Here's the address if you're looking at it somewhere else. If you're watching on YouTube direct, then feel free to stick any questions in the thread on the YouTube video page. That's absolutely fine. Either way, I'll see it and I'll come back to you and give you an answer.